Harry Belafonte first came to the world's attention singing songs he'd heard in his childhood. His album, Calypso, was meant to be a tribute to the music of the Caribbean, but when it was released in 1956, it had an unexpected power. The music launched him as a pop star and a social activist. The Library of Congress honored Calypso Wednesday by adding it to the National Recording Registry. I recently had the honor to sit down with Belafonte. I asked him how the album and its most iconic song came to be.
I did it as part of what would become a larger display of the music of various cultures around the world. I had a deep interest in Africa. I had a deep interest in Latin America. But I got only to Calypso, and then the world stopped. I woke up one day and everybody was singing Deo.
Come, Mr. Tallyman, tally me banana. Daylight come and we want go home.
So when the Banana Boat stepped in, it had a space all of its own.
One of the things that I find really fascinating about the Banana Boat song specifically is that people love playing it, they love listening to it, they love singing it, but the song really is about the struggle of workers. Does it strike you as interesting that people love the song and you hear it at parties, but really it's a song about human struggle?
Well, I tell you, most of my family in the Caribbean, in Jamaica, were plantation workers. And the harvesting of bananas and sugarcane and all the crops, because that was our main stay. And as a kid, everybody sang the Banana Boat. Singing was a big part of the culture because it helped with the tediousness of working in the sun and all day long.
These albums, your records, people across the country are listening, they're buying your records, and yet we're still living in a Jim Crow era. What did you think about that? That people were willing to have you in their homes on the record player, but not necessarily afford you the rights that you were afforded under our Constitution?
When I sang these songs, I was not quite prepared for its impact. And I sang the song of the laborer coming out of Jamaica. I wrote a couple of songs myself. The first thought was not so much the intensity of the success of the material, but I understood the power of it. There's a lot of people listening. But when I saw the power of it, the big question for me was, what do you do with this platform?
Belafonte would go on to become a high-profile figure in the civil rights era, partnering with Martin Luther King Jr. His album, Calypso, joined a diverse class for this year's induction to the Recording Registry, including everything from early classical music recordings to Run DMC's Raising Hell. And I can tell you, Anne-Marie, in sitting down with Mr. Belafonte, it was one of the most moving experiences of my life as a reporter, because he's lived and seen so many things that when we talked about the civil rights movement and the struggle and his very close connection to Dr. King, to Malcolm X, to even the first Prime Minister of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, he had a very close connection to him. Everybody in the room, producers, photojournalists, sound, tears.
I can totally understand it. I think what I've always found very impressive about him is that he had an option not to become political, not to speak out. He was doing just fine. He was loved by white and black alike, and he could have just rode that out.
Didn't have to do it.
Right, and I admire him so much for that.
He talks about that too. He suggests that because I asked him, I said, were you worried that the record label and the movie studios who controlled everything in your life as far as like your income would somehow retaliate against you? And he had some really interesting answers. Hopefully we'll play a little bit of that tomorrow.